As a trauma survivor, I have always been interested in resilience. But growing up, I believed it was something that you were born with. Then in graduate school, I learned that it was a quality that we all possess and a set of skills we can all strengthen. Most of my resilience has come from writing and seeing myself in new ways by confronting the stories I've always told myself. The more I did that, the stronger I became, and I've dedicated my life to helping others do this work. This podcast is for anyone who wants to understand their story and how to revise it, because when we do that work, we change the world. Welcome to the 5th episode in my season of Summer Shorts, a series of shorter episodes where you'll hear from writers working in the trenches right alongside you. Each week, they'll share their fears, doubts, and questions they have about the craft of writing and their writing lives. Consider it your backstage pass to my coaching practice. This week, you'll hear from Wendy Hawkes, an emerging writer who won the 2023 Writer's Digest Personal Essay Contest. Wendy is working on a memoir about how surviving Category 5 storm Hurricane Dorian while living in the Bahamas taught her how to go with the flow. During this episode, we'll discuss the struggle writers face around what details truly belong in their books, the woe is me trap writers can fall into when writing in the present tense, and how to turn yourself into your story's hero. Before we get to our conversation, I have a few questions for you. Have you struggled to pare down long, detailed scenes, especially when they deal with tough material? Have you received feedback from others that something in your book is just too much, or that we're seeing too much of this is what happened to you and not enough about how you coped? What do you do when this happens? I hope you'll ponder these questions as you listen along. Now let's get to my conversation with Wendy Hawkes. Hey writers, have you written a draft or two of a memoir only to feel completely lost? Do you wonder what the story really is or how to structure it? Or have you received competing advice from some people who love certain parts of your story while others don't? Or worst of all, have you been ghosted by agents and editors or received the cryptic, great writing, but just not for us email? Most writers think the answer is diving deeply into their pages, but to figure out what's missing, what needs to be retooled, and what needs to be tossed, you need a bird's eye view of your manuscript. That's what I'll provide in Camp Structure, my proven program that will help you understand how stories work, decide what parts of your life actually belong in your book, and develop a clear path through the revision landmines most memoirists face. As a member of Camp Structure, you'll benefit from expert coaching, membership in a motivated cohort, monthly Ask Me Anything office hours, and instruction that will help you finish this book and the next one. So if you want to feel confident about the story you're telling, clarity around how to write it, and the focus needed to get the job done, sign up for Camp Structure by clicking on the link in the show notes. Camp begins on Tuesday, September 10th, which will be here before you know it, so be sure to grab your spot. Well, hello, Wendy. Welcome to the Writing Your Resilience podcast. I am so delighted to have you on.
Oh, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, actually. And thanks for letting your listeners and your followers of your newsletter jump on in. So appreciative of that.
Well, it's always exciting to have one of my newsletter followers on because then I get to see your faces. You know, I see your names when people email me, but then I don't know what anyone looks like. And today I get to see what you look like. And I get to know a little bit more about you and the story that you're working on. So let's go ahead and start there.
Sure. Well, I guess my term is emerging writer. I'm new to about a year in or so of writing. So far, I've published one article in insider.com.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I was shortlisted for a Women on Writing Nonfiction essay contest. I won second place in the Writer's Digest 2023 Personal Essay Awards, which just keeps niggling me on to keep going, which is great. So that last essay actually was in concert with my current project, writing my debut memoir, kind of a coming of middle-aged survival memoir. So I've been a nomad all my life. I was an Army brat, so moved around a lot as a child. My first career was a professional dancer. We were called gypsies because you move around the world for the different gigs. And I've been a scuba diver for seems like forever. So wannabe mermaid, dreaming one day of living on a tropical island. And in 2019, I got that chance.
Wow.
I know. I know. We kind of went crazy and like, nope, let's ditch this normal American life. And my new second husband, newlyweds at the time, had a fantastic opportunity to move to the Bahamas. We got
Mm.
to stay at a friend's house and try it out for a little while we figured it out. And we decided in that short time, a few months over the summer, yep, this is it. We're going to move here. Until we were walloped by climate change and
Mm.
rapid intensification in the name of Category 5 Hurricane Dorian.
Yeah.
And we were at ground zero. So yeah, the survival story and of when your eat, pray, love life turns into the perfect storm is what I have been working on. So kind of dealing with the aftermath. How do you escape a completely devastated island and the stuckness as we moved in with my mom to heal and the pandemic hit and we were very stuck there, sort of captive for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
So we escape only to get stuck again, and kind of makes you wonder what price paradise. So I am dealing with or examining what it means to have community and to take control of your life and grab that brass ring, and realizing that maybe there's not so much control and you have to learn how to go with the flow. So now you might notice the water. I go with the flow every day because now we live on a boat.
Very
And that's
cool. And I love that we have this water theme. And a couple of things I want to point out in your pitch, because we talked about this before, I hit the record button. It's your first podcast appearance, and this is a beautiful pitch that you have created. And one of the things that you did really well, and I want to point this out for listeners who might also be emerging writers going like, oh, what do I do? Or how can I do this? And that is the two books that you chose, Eat, Pray, Love, when Eat, Pray, Love meets The Perfect Storm. Now,
yes,
when you're sending this to agents, you might use some different books to actually be your comps, right? Because those are huge
absolutely.
things that you're
Those are
talking about.
enormous. Those
But,
are not my comment. No, no.
being able to talk about conceptually what your book is using terms like that, I have an immediate sense of what your book's about. So
Oh, good.
kudos to that. And also, even though you say you're an emerging writer, you're doing great. I mean, you've got all of these publications, you won a contest. That is amazing and a testament to both your talent and your hard work. So, you've been working hard on this project for a while, and a question has been coming to you. And so, tell us about the question that you have.
Absolutely. Part of it might be because I'm writing my work in present tense, which some people, that's a whole different question, because some people are like, it can't be memoir if it's present tense. How can you think back and make sense of? It's been challenging, but yay for, doing the hardest genre and the hardest method right out of the gate. But one of the things that came up with writing in the present tense, or maybe even not, even if it were past tense, when we're writing those scenes of memoir that are most formative for us. So
Mm,
the stakes get high, and then something happens, that last straw that makes us change.
mm-hmm.
How do we write that to keep the reader engaged, to show how important it is, and to up those stakes and keep that drama and tension going without slipping into that victim mode and perhaps dwelling in the, oh,
Mm,
this happened, oh, woe is me. So
yeah.
that juggling that balance of keeping it going, and this is important to share without it seeming over dramatic.
Yeah, so making it not gratuitous, but
Yes.
understanding does it really need to be here? And I
Right.
think this is a question that so many writers face, especially in the memoir genre, because there are things that you have to write for yourself in order to heal that may or may not belong in your book. So, that's one of the first things that you want to think about when you come to any scene that might be over the top or more than the reader can handle, or especially if there's some sort of traumatic element in the experience, is you want to pause and say, what does it feel like to me in my body? When I'm writing about this, what is that intensity level? Where one is like, oh, fly going by, 10 is like, this feels like high trauma to me, worst thing has ever happened. You want to think about that, because the very best writing for you as the writer and also for the readers between a 4 and a 7. It's not nothing, right? It's got to have some intensity, and that intensity, just as you beautifully said, has to ratchet up. However, you don't want it to be so high that the reader doesn't know what to do with it, and that you as the writer don't know what it means. So you want to check in with the body, and then you want to ask yourself, why am I writing this? Why have I put this in? And the reason you do that is because the first question that every writer comes to the page for when it comes to memoir is, what happened to me? And sometimes this can be a litmus test, and based on the things we've talked about, you may be past this litmus test, but I always tell everyone to start here. When you're putting it on the page in a book form and you're saying this is the book, not just like these disparate pieces that you wrote for a while that you're trying to hope will become a book.
Right.
Why are you putting it in there? And sometimes people will have this, conscious or even unconscious thought of, but they need to know what happened to me, or they need to know it's real.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
So,
validating our own story, sort of.
yes. So
Okay.
as you think about these pieces, did that come to mind at all?
It definitely, yes, it definitely, I could see this came to me because I had a lovely critique partner who was the one
Mm-hmm.
who pointed it out, where up until that point, which is, it kind of brings that moment in my work brings me sort of to that dark night of the soul. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
big, a right before where I think all hope is lost. What are we going to
Mm-hmm.
do now? So I knew that, or thought, or feel that it's important, but she thought it's so much. I think her term was, it started feeling like the Keystone Cops, like now another thing is happening and now another thing is
Mm-hmm.
happening. So yes, I think it was perhaps the way I was writing it, which for me is probably too detailed, probably putting in every little thing that happened
Mm-hmm.
because I remember it that way.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily need to be told that way, I think is what I'm learning.
Yeah, and what I hear is that this is, if we were to think in beat sheet terminology, and if you are listening to this and you're like, what do you mean by beat sheets? I will put a link in the show notes that describes what these beats are. This is something that comes from Save the Cat, the last book on screenwriting you'll ever need. So this is a screenwriting tool that people use to understand their books, and this would be the beat sequence called Bad Guys Closing In. So we're going to talk about how do you make sense of this from your book or for your book in just a moment. But I want to first think about, okay, so once you've gotten out of your system, I know what happened to me. I've made some sense of this for myself. It's very important because you cannot write a book for an audience that is not you until you've made sense of it for yourself. You want to make sure that you know who your readers are. Like, who is going to pick up this book? And you
Right.
need to know what are the questions they have. And not just, and there's going to be twofold questions. Like some of it will be logistical issues, like what is on an island that has just been devastated? What resources are there or not there? Or how do people call for help? Or, how do you escape a place that's in the middle of the ocean and you can't just get in your car and drive away? So there are going to be some logistical things that readers are going to have questions about, and you need to make sure you're answering these questions. But the most important thing with memoir is that we have a transformation inside your narrator. Okay, so the narrator has to change. So when we're thinking about the bad guys closing in, the thing you want to think about are the 6 things that need fixing. Now, again, if you do not know anything about beat sheets, you might be like, what the what? So let me break it down for you. So, the 6 things that need fixing are the characters' defects or problems that they bring into the story. So, these are faulty beliefs, faulty behaviors that they have, things they do that don't actually get them what they want, relationships that are problematic. That's what the 6 things that need fixing are.
Mhm.
So, these character traits are going to be developed in your beginning along with the action sequence that also has to happen, in terms of what the plot points are in your book. When we get to the bad guys closing in, things in the external environment are going to trigger those internal bad guys. So maybe I don't feel like I can be a leader. And you're showing, in your opening, like, I'm just a follower. I do what everyone else says. Suddenly, you're in a situation where everybody's looking to you for the answers. And now that bad guy of like, I can't be a leader is coming back. And so, one of the things you definitely have to show in this sequence is the narrator wrestling with the fact that she doesn't know if she can do it. So it's the details plus internal conflict problem. So you want to make sure with all of these sequences that that's there. And once you've done that, you do have to ratchet up the tension. And it should be, I think this is going to work, but then a setback happens, or or it could be, I think this is going to work and it seems like it starts to work, but then it doesn't. So you do want a little of that push pull during this point, because you are trying to get to the lowest point in the book. That's your goal. The all hope is lost moment where you're getting into the dark night of the soul. You explained it beautifully. Once you've done that, you want to look at the details. Again, you're thinking about, what does the reader need to know? What questions might the reader have? And when it comes to emotions, this is where we get ourselves in trouble. This is where it gets a little saccharine or overly melancholy, or it's moving into that victim role.
Right.
In the bad guys closing in, because you are ratcheting up the tension and you are being hard on your character, which is the story terms we use sometimes to talk about how do you raise the tension, we can have a lot of emotional language. So that's one thing you want to look for is, am I crying a lot? Am I screaming dramatically? Are there a lot of feeling words in this sequence? So you want to see, if that's there. And I would say even get out a highlighter and print out your draft and highlight all of that.
Yeah,
And
that's a great
say
idea.
what's there.
That's a great idea.
The other thing you want to make sure you're not doing is like, this keeps happening to me, and then, oh no, this keeps happening, but you haven't established your narrator at this point as the hero. And what I mean by hero is a person who makes decisions.
Right.
So if your narrator, even though bad things keep happening, they still have to be making decisions.
Right.
So
And
yeah, how is all this hitting you?
yeah, absolutely. So what I'm hearing you say too is, yes, you have to show those things that are important and fill in selective details
Mm-hmm.
to be able to place the reader and to be able to follow along and in the scene and what's going on and have an understanding. But that there also has to be that voice from the narrator, the
Yeah.
main character, me in a memoir, that shows that I still have a certain amount of agency. So yes,
Yes.
things can happen, but I'm still in charge of my life and I have to sort that out. And
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's just going to show in a book, I guess, that this happened and this is kind of goes to that, and this happened and this happened.
Exactly.
With memoir, it's not just this happened, it's making sense of it. So maybe what I need to do is in that scene, especially, make sure that I'm stepping out and doing that zoom out thing and make sure that I
Mm-hmm.
have a little bit of that reflective voice to balance all of those things that are happening to ratchet up.
Yeah.
Balancing it out, will that help take away some of that victim feel as well, sort of?
Yeah. And I would say it doesn't even have to be reflection.
Mm.
From reflection is the writer at her desk inserting her wisdom. Sometimes it's interiority.
Ah, right.
So the difference is interiority is, what is the character thinking right now? And can you show without, having 5 pages of the character just in their head, but you want to show it quickly, the character wrestling with the problem. They're racing around the island and they see this payphone and they go, yes, a payphone. They pick it up and it's dead. Internal dialogue. Are you kidding me? I can't believe this is happening again. And then, it always happens like this. Maybe that's part of the thing that needs fixing, is like they're always feeling like, doom is around the corner. And so maybe that's a piece that's being pulled forward. So you want to think about, what did you set up in the beginning? Pull that forward and make that part of the internal conflict. And, another thing you can do when you're looking at these scenes is look at how long they are. And so the part where the narrator is dealing with the conflict, like something happens, obstacle happens, and they're wrestling with what it means for them and figuring out what to do, that part is called the emotional beat. That place in your scene is going to have the most words, right? That's where you want your words. But what often happens when we're developing these scenes is we start way before and we give like this long setup of all the things that are happening and the fauna and the flowers and, and every single person and the smells. And you do need a little of that, but you don't need that much. So you want to ask yourself, how can I get in as late as possible?
Yep.
And then once the decision is made, get out as fast as you
Right.
can.
Right.
So as you reflect on these scenes, do you think that that could be part of the issue is like maybe your setup is a little too long?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think it's probably a little over detailed where
Mm,
I can probably go back in yet again because it's yet again more revisions to
yes.
yes to cut out more. And probably one of the hardest things that I'm learning, and I'm sure it's the same for many new writers, is figuring out that trust your reader. How
Mm-hmm.
much is too much, how much is too little, and finding that balance of not over detailing it. So
Yes. And something
yes.
that can actually help you is listening to your book be read to
Hmm.
you.
Yeah.
So there's great value in reading your book out loud, but you can actually have your book read to you. And so there are a number of different apps you can use. Someone actually wrote a post on the Jane Friedman blog about this, and I will share that in the show notes so that people have
Fantastic.
that. Also, and I am not an affiliate of anyone, at this point in time, so I'm not endorsing anything. But Natural Reader is an app that you can use that has a natural voice. They do have a free version. You have a little sample you can listen to. And then it is something that you do have to pay for. So you would have to decide, is it worth it for you? But even if you just use the sample and just listen to a small portion, I was listening to a manuscript of mine and it was revolutionary for me because I was
Mm.
a regular voice. So it wasn't like a robot voice,
Right.
a Siri robot
Yep.
voice. It was a real voice reading it back to me, and I could hear things like, oh, cut that line. Oh, wait, what is that? Oh my gosh, I'm bored here. So that can be really helpful. And you may, in listening and sitting back and just even closing your eyes, not even looking at the words, but just listening, you may have some revelations.
Right. That's a great idea. Thank you. Great tip. See,
You
came for the tips.
Yeah. Well, and you had a great
Thank
question. And I know a lot of people struggle with this. So I'm so glad that you asked this. And I always like to end with 3 lightning round questions. So I'm going to share those with you and hear what you have to say because even though you are an emerging writer, you are not without wisdom, my friend. So we're going to
ah,
take some of it. So, what
thanks.
is the best piece of writing advice you have ever received?
This is going to sound a little out of the box, but shortly after I started writing everything down after we did get back to safety, and at that point it was just a cathartic, I need to get this out of my head. I got a fortune cookie that I have taped the fortune onto my laptop that says, "Get to the point and keep it clear and simple." So
Yes.
since I am one who loves all of the words and need to shove them all in there, this is sort of what I struggle with constantly. So it's a fortune cookie, but for me, it's what I try to work for, is just try to get down, hone it down to the nitty gritty and to the important stuff.
That is the most important thing any writer can do. And it is also one of the hardest things for every writer to do. So you are definitely not alone in that.
Mm.
So you're working on a memoir. That is always an emotionally challenging endeavor. How do you nurture your resilience as you do this work?
That's a really great question, and something that all of us need to think about, because that whole thing about self-care, oh man, especially, I don't know, I'm a mom. I have 2 kids grown, and that habit of that so many of us, especially women, especially moms, whatever, we're
Mm-hmm.
busy and we always put ourselves last.
Yeah.
So one of the lovely things that I got from one of your episodes where your mentor, Professor Lenny
Oh,
Ecterling,
yes.
was
Lenny
talking
Ecterling.
about,
I
yeah,
love him.
I loved that. And he was talking about one of the ways, a couple of things to do that help with post-traumatic growth
Mm-hmm.
was savoring life, appreciating,
Yes.
savoring life. And I'm super fortunate in that I have this new life where I live out in nature on the water. And while it's not without its challenges, all I have to do is go outside and remind myself that we get one shot at this journey.
Mm-hmm.
couple of laps around the sun. And so I do try to savor that. If I write a particularly challenging scene or something that's hard, I try to reward myself with the hard things. So,
Good.
chocolate for sure. Do something fun. Like I wrote one really emotionally, oh my gosh, scene, and then went and did something fun with my hair, got some fairy hair tinsels put in it just to like completely shift the scale on that. So yeah, and community, which I think that was also on that episode. And
Yes.
finding a new community with boaters has been fantastic, but now finding new, I'm still working on this and building my community of writers, and that, other people who kind of get it, and that connection is wonderful for me. So that's
Absolutely. And we all need to have writers in our lives because all of our other friends love us. That is
yes.
very true. And they will ask you 1,000 times, when is your book coming out? And why can't I hold it? And what's the holdup? They don't understand how long all of this takes. So, yes, your writer friends normalize both the doubts and all of the trials and tribulations. Well, if someone wants to learn more about you or they'd like to connect, what is the best way for them to do that?
Sure. Thanks for asking. I have a newish website. It's actually my name, Wendy, Wendy, Hawkes, HAWKES.com. Don't have any idea how I managed to get my name for the URL, but wendyhawkes.com, where I just write some stuff, and hopefully we'll be filling that out more as my journey goes along. And then I also do follow along on Instagram, Wendy H _ Aquatania. That's the name of my boat, AQUATANIA on Instagram. So,
Wonderful.
and
And if you missed that, it will be in the show notes. So fear not. You will be able to see exactly how things are spelled, and you will be able to get in touch with Wendy. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's such a joy to have you on. I've loved this conversation, and I can't wait to share it with everyone else.
thank you. It's been a pleasure. And again, appreciate you sharing all of the knowledge and bringing even more knowledgeable writers and editors and everybody that you curate for us. It's a wealth of information, and we're so grateful. This has been a blast. Thanks.
Are you a writer who struggles with doubts? Do you wonder if your stories are good enough? Do you wish you had some simple tricks that would make the writing life just a little bit easier? Become part of my Writing and Resilience community by signing up for my newsletter. As a thank you, you'll receive a free copy of Write More, Fret Less, 5 brain hacks that will supercharge your productivity, creativity, and confidence. The link is in the show notes. That's it for today's episode. Before you leave, I would love your help spreading the word about this podcast. You can do this in a few very simple ways. Click on the subscribe button in the upper right-hand corner, then leave a 5-star review. You can also let me know what you think or share ideas for the podcast by connecting with me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or through my Writing and Resilience newsletter, which you can have delivered directly to your inbox.